And I'm going to take a moment to welcome everyone who I've not already spoken with, who's not been chatting with us already. This is the November 15 edition, as you know, of Jung After Work. We have monthly meetings on the third Monday evening of each month. And Evan Haarbauer is going to present this evening on Jung's Black Books. And Evan's been a student of Jung for quite a while. I've known Evan for 4 years, and we met in the Jung After Work in Birmingham in person when we were down at Workplay before the sickness. And we've kept in touch. My wife and I live in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, looking after my folks. And so the sickness had a silver lining for us because we got to do this on Zoom. And so we're grateful to be back in touch with all of you. But Evan's been studying Dr. Jung, as I mentioned. And his first, I believe it was your first presentation you did for Jung After Work was on the Red Book several years ago. And I think this interest in the Black Book was an outgrowth of that, or more likely just a general fascination with the work of Dr. Jung. So without any more talk, welcome, Evan.
Great. Well, let me get my thing set up because I'm going to share the screen, not see most of you, and then talk to myself or make it seem like I'm just talking to in my own room. But let's see. Okay. If there's any problem, just unmute yourself and we can let it be known. But okay. So, as Bert mentioned, I did a presentation on the Red Books 2018 for Jung After Work when it was first starting. And I had been interested in the Red Book for 10 years, and I'll get more to that. But I wanted to just sort of introduce it by saying we have people from apparently North Carolina, Texas, Colorado, the Netherlands. And so technically we're all existing not only day, evening, and night, but yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Because the Netherlands is already past the AM. So we're in the twilight zone, I think, in some way or the other. And many of you I know, and I'm glad to see all of y'all. And speaking as an American, it's not Thanksgiving yet, but I feel a little bit like it's Christmas. So I wasn't going to have some imagery, as much imagery, because the Black Books don't have as much imagery as the Red Books, but there's some visual artists here. So in the Black Books, Jung talks with a character named Elijah, and Elijah says regarding the multiplicity of God and gods and people that he doesn't like the new multiplicity because it's difficult to think about. And Jung tells him that it's not to be contemplated. It's an imaginary painting. It's to be viewed. So I'm going to have kind of two parts. I got to play some of it by ear. I'm going to say why I'm interested in what Jung was doing, how he got involved. And I'm going to go over some content and process Jung as the shaman magician, and maybe where we can go into the future. In 2010, like I said, I read the Red Book many times. It came like noetic lightning to me. The text, the images, the history, and that book was a completion of a project that, or was based off the Black Books, and Liber Novus is known as New Book in Latin. The Black Books were experimental journals. Here started November 12th, 1913. So we're 3 days after the 108th anniversary of when Jung started that ball rolling. So that was fall as well. He searched for and spoke to his soul, mainly in the form of writing and vision. He called it his confrontation with the soul or the unconscious. Content of the Red Book was finished. The basic content was finished by 1916, but the Black Books went through 1928 and 3 days in 1932. My first edition is falling apart from so much use. Apparently the first edition is more valuable, but mine would be considered completely destroyed, but it's actually priceless rather than valueless. The Red Book finalized, 2009 publication finalized the process that Jung and colleagues started. And the editor, Shamdasani, tells how it was completed. It was Shamdasani used an unfinished manuscript corpus, which included leather-bound illuminated manuscript, draft material that was intended for but never transcribed into the manuscript. It added the third book, Scrutinies, and included the translation, footnotes, appendices, etc. He recommended first reading it without footnotes, because in a way, a quarter of the book is footnotes, as well as having two copies, one to the translation, one to the illuminated paintings and calligraphy. The Black Books also have the facsimile, the reproduction of the handwriting, translation, introduction, etc. There are 7 Black Books, 2 through 7 published last year. It's basically a reception and construction of a mythic cosmogony, psychological and theological cosmology, philosophical world system, through participation and witness of divine intervention through the process of Jung's mental gymnastics. It was an effort to guide and regulate mind, a complex way to organize a worldview and myth, at least first to Jung, in the face of never-ending specialization of information and social diversity. Book 7 is the largest, containing material from 1916 to 32. It wasn't included in the Red Books except for hints in paintings or substance in paintings. And the real end of the book 7 actually wasn't included in last year's publication. It's not clear why. Jungian scholar Dr. Lance Owens, suggests it may include descriptions of Jung's post-heart attack visions in hospital 1944, which he discusses in the Memories, Dreams, Reflections. But Jung has described these visions as not only indescribable, but the most tremendous things he ever experienced. And I just ask that you kind of keep that in mind, because given the exceptional and intensity of the Black Books experiences, the visions of 1944 apparently surpassed that, which one can only, well, apparently not describe, but we can try to imagine. There's an unpublished dream journal, it's 1917 to 25, with a separate development, so that's around the same time. That'll hopefully be published. So what did Jung see and hear? What did he point to? And what did he offer us? Jung actually called the project his Black Book, meaning singular. Book one was actually Brown, started it much earlier in life and plays no role in this recent series, not much. He began journaling after a career and family, when dreams and visions became active and disturbing. He spoke to his soul, mainly writing for many nights before she started more continuously speaking. Her soul is mostly described as a she in his case, what he later termed anima. And though it's all a soulful activity, that plays a large role. Mostly when she's speaking, I believe, and it seems that he's writing it out. So it's like a channeling. Red Book is described as an aesthetic elaboration, whereas his collected works of later were more understanding. So book, well, book 2 through 7 occurred mostly as his night work, and editor suggests mainly after dinners, often into the late night, pen in hand, pipe in the other, maybe alcoholic drink. It seems to be largely real time, rather than a dream-like thing where it's experienced and then recorded afterwards once awake. This seems to be occurring largely in the moment as it flows through. I wish Jung was more explicit in talking about the techniques as applied as he used them, because that's one of the few secrets that seems to still exist about Jung. Okay. I'm going to have to shorten some of this, but Mercurius, that two-faced god, comes as light of nature, as savior, only to those whose reason strives toward highest light ever received by man, who don't trust exclusively to knowledge of humanity, meaning as opposed to self-knowledge, knowledge of creator. For those who are unmindful of the light of nature turns into a perilous, deceptive, delusory light, psychopomp into diabolical seducer. Lucifer, light bringer, could have brought light, or who could have brought light, becomes the father of lies, whose voice in our time, supported by press and radio, revels in orgies, propaganda, leads untold millions to ruin. The fear most people naturally have of the inner voice isn't so childish. Contents that rise up and confront limited consciousness are far from harmless. As a rule, signify specific danger to which the person is liable to succumb. What the inner voice whispers is generally something negative, if not actually evil. This must be so because we're usually not as unconscious of our virtues as vices, and because we suffer less from good than from bad in us. I'm just going to kind of summarize or skip some of this, but the inner voice makes us conscious of evil from which the community is suffering, nature or humanity. The inner voice brings evil before us in a tempting, convincing way to make us succumb. If we don't partially succumb, no regeneration or healing can happen. If we succumb so completely, the contents expressed act as devils and catastrophe ensues. I partly use those quotes because I think that in some ways the themes are applied to the Black Book's experiences. So although a voice or vision can come like a thief in the night, which doesn't sound too friendly, but is a term from the Bible. Some of this is like a faucet and bathtub, where part of the point is the Goldilocks effect of getting it just right, but also dealing with the fire and water, which the divine Newman or the unconscious can take. Jung was remarkable at going far out, but not being destroyed. Sometimes he brought sharks and thorns, sometimes frozen grapes and pomegranates. Jung said it was an experiment on him, even though he considered it also an experiment by him. So this is a model of typical dream stages. If you could just take a moment to look through that some. I'm probably going to have to rush through some of my stuff or cut some out, but drama, development, culmination, and lysis, recuperation. These are common stages as a model, and lysis means a gradual reduction of symptoms or problems. Lysis has always played a difficult role in my life because I haven't had as many of them as perhaps I'd like, and Jung discusses problems when there is no lysis. We find these elements in the black books, as if the black books and the trances and work were a big dream, what Jung appropriated from tribal African terminology, meaning the most important dreams, usually those related to the collective unconscious. Okay, I'm going to skip the next slide. You know, the last work that Jung did in his life, the main work was one on dreams, the function and interpretation of dreams, how important they were. But around 1916, he wrote an essay, The Transcendent Function, which emphasized also the role of active imagination and how it played a larger role in individuation. Sometimes dreams were harder to get information from, and because of the sleeping state and so forth. So he developed the technique of active imagination, a technique we don't seem to find in most conventional psychology, psychiatry. We don't tend to discuss at the Thanksgiving dinner table. But okay. It's technically simple to note the other voice in writing, to answer statements from the standpoint of ego, as if dialogue between two humans with equal rights gives credit to the other for valid arguments and considers it worthwhile to modify a conflicting standpoint through comparison and discussion, or at least distinguish them clearly. Long conflicts will have to be borne, demanding sacrifices. I said simple, it actually says, you may see very simple. He says it's very simple to note the other voice. Of course, he's a lifelong prolific writer, and I think probably was biased, but an autonomous voice. So anyway, he compares that with the contrast that with the visual products of the unconscious, which he claims here can be, I'm sorry. Which can be more difficult, and I'll hopefully be able to have time. We started a few minutes late, so hopefully I have 15 minutes or 10 minutes. But okay, part of the point of the transcendent function is the development of a living third out of this movement, a suspension between opposites. Unfortunately, I can't go into that too much, but it plays a large role in the black books. Duality, opposites, the creation of a transcendent third. mediated by the symbol producing function. This led to notions of, or development, elaboration at least, of notions of self, the confrontation with archetypes other than self, anima, wise old man, along with the shadow, and so on. The child in the black books, I hope someone follows through this with me and talks with me, but the child plays a large role. The black books illuminated much about it that the red book was unable to do. There are themes of son of God, child born in the soul, many issues. I wanted to say this, at least because one of the greatest obstacles to psychological understanding is inquisitive desire to know whether the psychological factor cited is true or correct. If description of it isn't erroneous or false, then the factor is valid in itself and proves its validity by its very existence. meaning some of this stuff is meaningful, substantial, important, not just untrue or incorrect, illusion, delusion, waste of time, misleading. Okay. I think I'm going to burst through into my so-called part 2. I rather like this set of series of pictures. I wish I didn't have to burst through it, so I'm going to pause just a moment to. I took this mostly summer, fall. Okay. All right, this is a heavy slide. If you could just take a moment, 30 seconds or so, to look at this. I'm not going to read it all. I'm not going to read it. These are characters and concepts found in the Red Book, explicitly or by name. So let's just kind of scan this. For those who can't see, if there are any, get with me after and we'll go over it. You know, a lot of these are probably not only don't make sense, but if you haven't read it or thought about it, some of them are familiar. I'll get to some delineation in a bit of that. Okay, what time is it? All right. Well, hopefully, these are characters that show in the black books, unlike the red books. The red books, the 2009 red book included these either implicitly or in footnotes or paintings. Okay. All right. These are the initial sketch, which Jung said he didn't understand when he made it, which is a strange thing. But and then the painting, which he finalized, I believe, later in the year, maybe a year later. It sort of captures the essence of a major theme of the Black Book, the 7 Sermons to the Dead, and the cosmology, which Jung ended up reckoning with. We can't obviously go into it all, but this is a symbol of Abraxas, universal deity, plays an extremely large role. As the pleroma on the outside, you see here mentioned. the moon, devil, sun, sun god, bird, serpent, science, art, eros, phanes. Oddly, phanes here as a winged child, male child, apparently, does not seem to play a, was not elaborated as much here. This Abraxas symbol is this, but Phanes came later that year in 1916 and is shown more explicitly in the Black books. Okay. Oh, one star God or a star and soul and human being in the middle, all fundamental. Okay, that's my face, 3D X-ray. I can't go into that. Spirits of the dead play a very large role. And okay, I'm just gonna have to go a little longer, but I'm gonna cut through some of this. I like this phrase, Messiah is a UFO with legs. I heard that recently, and you know, very strange thing, and many people probably either don't care, don't know, or haven't heard that connection. But sometimes the self as an archetype or compensating totality symbol plays a role in all this. The self is often connected, at least in Jung's models, both with a savior or God person, God man, divine person, as well as UFOs. That's why the book Modern Flying Saucers, Modern Myth of Things in the Sky talk a lot about that. I highly recommend that. Okay. Yeah. Self often starts in dream series as a point, dot, or seed. His alchemy works talk about that. In the Black books, the seed plays a role. Man. This is an example of Jung's attention and fidelity to the experience. I just want to briefly touch on it. The original painting in the Red Book is here. Jung in the Black books, which is up here, created these runes or hieroglyphs given to him by Ha the magician, I believe, but Ka, the figure Ka, gave these to Ha. Here's the printed version, and then here's Jung's embedding it into the painting. Oddly, these are interpreted by Ha in the Black books verbally, and a remarkable coinciding of the these were made first, and then like day or days later were interpreted verbally, and there's a remarkable connection between his description of this, and it's like the sun is encapsulated in the thing, and then the water touches, and this whole thing. I recommend it. You know, Jung later saw all this as an initiation of himself into a kind of shamanic role. The term magician plays, the term magician is used in the book rather than shaman, but Jung does have many explicit descriptions of how it related to shamanism. You know, wounded healer, healed madman, shape-shifting persona with multiple masks that can play many roles in community. Jung was doctor, artist, scientist, priest-like figure. Initiation can break people. Luckily, it did not break him completely. The soul told him that the fire burns right through you. a woman mentioned earlier about how this work plays a role in general notions or feelings of transformations during this time. And regardless of how we describe or model it um, among one another or within ourselves, we must talk turkey sometimes in order to really grasp the past, present, and future. I had to say that because Thanksgiving is coming up. So one way or the other, we have to talk turkey. I can't, unfortunately, I can't, I'm going to go to my last slides. I can't read you these slides. I guess it's, I just want to hold it on this. I recommend this book by Ivan Illich. It relates to the moment. It talks about a crisis in industrial society, the synergy, the crisis through the synergy of components, which grew it, where a change in one can affect the other. We will need a reevaluation of not only the basics, but some of the fundamentals of the structure of society. Okay. These will be the last 3 slides that will be pretty quick. And this one right here just shows, this is one of the last pages of the Black Books. In English, Jung wrote, "The quest begins." I don't know of any other time he wrote in English in these books. And he wrote, the quest begins. Maybe that was, preparing himself in a way for the world at large, because he often gave lectures in English and I think wrote some in English. But anyway, the quest begins. This is the original. This is the translation. Okay, so is there light at the end of the tunnel? What about at night? Is there light at the end of the tunnel at night too? I hope so, but let's make tunnels themselves lit up, colorful, visible, hearable, touchable. Or make a voice in the darkness, which can be another type of light, even when we can't see it all. In that sense, it doesn't matter if the light's at the end, because we've illuminated the present moment and either become the light or hold its hand. So keeping in mind that there are 4 seasons to this world, including winter, maybe we can revision, renew what Thanksgiving can be, become, mean in our hearts, our heads, our lives, nation, and world. So I will welcome you to give input and stay for discussion. The discussion will formally end at 6:30, 6:35, since we started a little late, but hopefully some of us will stay longer than that and we can discuss more. All right.
Thank you, Evan.
So everyone can unmute themselves if they wish, or at the moment in which they speak.
I was struck by your final slide where Dr. Jung wrote, "The quest begins," because the quote at the beginning of his first notebook is, my soul, where are you? Do you hear me? I speak, I call you. Are you there? I have returned. I am here again. I have shaken the dust of all the lands from my feet, and I have come to you. I am with you. After long years of long wandering, I have come to you again. Do you still know me? And then from 1913 through 1932, he wrote, what, nightly, something like that, Evan?
Oh, well, no. Often nightly, but often with either short, medium, or longer stretches in between. You know, for example, when he did more military service, although his mandala drawings were going on then, not every day, but and he describes some of that where you know, like, gosh, I've been away so long, let me speak, or why haven't you spoke, meaning the soul. So often it's nightly, often not. Between 1928 and 1932, actually, there doesn't seem to be any journal entries except for the last three in the late 1932, which is when that quest begins, was written. So, but I don't know if I mentioned, but the thing you just read, I believe, you know, there is a part where he, you know, talks about his soul as a desert, and he had to wait 30 days for it to fertilize, or like a garden, you know, and like, woe to those who cannot wait for even their soul to, you know, but for, I think for a while he basically wrote, meaning wrote to his soul without any response. So it's not, there's that element too, you know.
I found the image of the tunnels very fascinating. It reminds me basically of the whole individuation process. And I wonder where you found those images, because they speak a lot.
Those are wonderful. That's a wonderful bridge in Birmingham, Alabama, downtown, in between North and South Side. It actually bridges the two. But it's the same bridge, actually. I just took multiple pictures, or, you know, two views at two different takes. So the lights are moving quite quite psychedelic, but it's part of a beautification of Birmingham that many people have been involved in for years. And I mean, and, you know, I don't know if I doubt many people would want to hang out under the bridge for too long, but you know, it certainly makes driving or walking more better. And it also, well, so yeah, Birmingham.
Thank you.
Evan, I wanted to give you a fun fact about that bridge that I haven't quite, I don't know, take this with a grain of salt. I don't know about this for sure yet.
Mhm.
But in 1925, Jung visited New Mexico, and he took the train from New Orleans to Washington, D.C. And, you know, it might have been, he might have gone through Tuscaloosa, may have gone through Birmingham. I don't know for sure, but you know, that's something that's not out of the question. I'm working on that one. I'll have to get back to you. But anyway, just as a side note.
Nice. Keep digging on that and let us.
I will.
The archaeologist of the past. Yeah, just to mention, you know, Jung took many, for those who don't know, Jung took many trips around the world, including during the time period of the Black Books. New Mexico, I don't remember as many details in those areas, but there may have been 2 trips to the United States during that time period, and I don't think that may have been his trip to Africa too. I'm not sure, but Jung had a remarkable day life, whether it be professional writing, teaching, lecturing, psychotherapy, tripping around the world. But then this nightlife that he was able to do too, and he kind of shifted and balanced this whole thing, which is probably a very important dynamic, as well as justification for allowing him to do it, because, you know, if you get stuck in your fantasies at night and can't do the day work, you tend to stick out a little more. Has anyone read the Black Books or Red Book? Are you planning to do it after this? Are you, one person I know said to me, oh, maybe I'll read the Red Book. And I partly said to myself, it's such a hardcore thing. And it's not, the Red Book is one thing, the Black Books are another, but it's not just like, on the beach reading, although I think our friend Sam may have done some of that, but so anyway, I know a couple people certainly have. Does anyone have any comments on their experience with it or what they hope from it?
I have a question, Evan. I have read the Red Book. I've not read the Black Books. And what I'd heard from some people who know more about Jung than me was that the Red Books, the Black Book was kind of this ritual or set of experience that Jung had, and the Red Book was almost the breakthrough. The Black Book was an attempt to contact something. The Red Book was the actual experience of breaking through and being visited, and it was him sort of processing the material that's in the Black Books. Would you agree with that, or change any of that?
I would definitely change it, but also agree with some of it. I mean, the Black Books, I think the editor mentions that 50% of the content of the Black Book text is directly from the Red Books, more or less. None of the Red Book would be able to have happened without the Black Books, but the Red Book, and there's many levels and elements to this I'm still trying to understand, but the Red Book certainly was included both the processing and integrating, but also creative working with that both elaborated, but also sometimes continued the imaginative creative work. And there's a lot there, but there's something you said that I hope I try to touch on that. The Black Books were I was not just getting the feet wet, but diving in. And then the Red Books were largely after you toweled off, but are still like have water in your ear or something. But anyway, I hope I got some of that.
Sure.
Roberta.
Go ahead.
I was quite fascinated by the mandala slide that appeared to be a map of the psyche. And since in the 70s, I was in Baltimore when Joan Kellogg was basing her research on the mandala, which she based on Jung's book, Mandala Symbolism. And she went after that particular form because she found it was very healthy to work with psychiatric patients in a state hospital in New Jersey. And she found a tremendous value in her to draw mandalas herself, following the fact that Jung said that he drew a mandala many mornings when he was in the war, and he wanted to take a reading of what was going on within himself when he awoke in the morning and had to face the day being a doctor in a war zone. And so I've drawn mandalas quite a bit and studied them quite a bit. And the fact that what struck me was, number one, I don't remember seeing that form. I've collected maps of the psyche, but it seems to me, it's always seemed to me that Jung was able to contribute so much to our understanding of the psyche because he painted as well as wrote.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that he painted things and actually brought the material out of his dreams, especially into the Red Book, that to me seemed of course, I'm an art therapist and a master's of fine arts, but that seemed to me to allow us to comprehend a depth of the psyche that is not possible by just reading a lot of words.
Sure.
Linear, linear, linear.
Mhm.
And that particular slide, I don't know if you're able to go back to that slide, but if we all can envision it in our heads, that slide is in the red book, I assume, of the mandala of his that had I believe the pleroma on the outside and the sun in the center is symbolic of the self.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I can bring it up real quick just to have it a few seconds, but it's in the appendix, of both the black and the red.
Oh, good.
And
Kind of hard to see that a little bit.
I actually find that because that wonderful painting that he did of Philemon, his guide, I actually, as a pre-verbal therapist looking at art, music, and dance, oh, thank you so much. I actually find that I can kind of take my understanding of what he's trying to communicate to a deeper level within myself where I can feel it more deeply because it's a visual.
right.
And I can stand in front of it. And for instance, the sun in the center kind of feels like my heart. And what's above the center is words and thought and perhaps spirit. And below the heart would be deeper in the body and where grounding would be, where I would stand firmly on the ground. So I wondered if you could illuminate or add to whatever you were saying about this particular, what you remember about that particular slide. Oh, and the other thing is, the one that's on the left, is that a sketch for the one on the right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So the writing, he made his verbal associations to it in the sketch, and then he filled it out, I guess, in making the painting. So whatever you can share with us about that, I'd appreciate.
Yeah, I'll try to surf this a moment, but I haven't looked at it in a while, but I think actually, like it says here, that the sketch is found in the journal. I haven't seen it in a while, but I believe it was created early 1916, maybe even before, at least certainly during the Philemon Seven Sermons to the Dead, which is a kind of verbal sermonizing of many of the themes that he was sketching out here, some of which were already brought in 1915 prior, some of which were new, but yeah, I mean, geez, there's a lot there, right? The whole Jung, what I didn't mention is he also has not only did he do many of the architecture of his houses, but he did a lot of sculptures and carvings, not just paintings and drawings, but there's the book Word and Text, and I think I'm gonna stop this. I'm gonna unscreen share so I can gather my thoughts a little. Sometimes Jung would say for visual types, it's best if they do a visualization of the dream. For verbal types, they're going to more likely hear voice. Obviously, for Jung, he was doing both. I believe it was more verbal, but and the two often intersect. Part of the difficulty with the lineality or linear thing of words is not simply words, but the print history of books and so forth. And his illuminated manuscript style was, I believe, a way to kind of break up and make mosaic the imagination of both the words and the visions. But, and that the visions add color, which emotions attached to or reflect more easily. So I can probably yap longer. Does anyone else want to respond to that area?
I did want to, you said it's 1916, so that's just before the war. So
Oh, during the war.
is it during the war in Europe?
Yeah.
I know my grandfather went over in 1917, so 16, the war is happening, isn't it?
In Europe.
The
Mhm.
mandalas you mentioned that he made during the war, I don't remember the specific date, unfortunately, off the top of my head. I thought it was before the sketch was made. I could be wrong. That series of mandalas people can find in the Red Book. It plays a large role. It was largely detached from any specific writing, although it does carry themes of the writing and the runes. Oh, is that? No, I don't think the runes are in those mandalas, but and then if you recall that, is it the last mandala of that series that there was a symmetry break and it broke more? So the symmetry
Is that in
break,
the book Mandala Symbolism?
I have not read that, but it was part of the
Mhm.
military mandalas that he was doing in his journal.
Yeah, we as art therapists find them to be very, very important because Joan Kellogg's work was made available to the public by a young woman named Suzanne Fincher, who's also in the South. She's in Atlanta, near Atlanta. And Robert Johnson wrote the introduction to the book, Creating Mandalas, saying that, basing part of his introduction on the fact that Jung felt the need for the mandala during the First World War, and Robert Johnson affirmed that the mandala seemed to be coming up again in the 90s before the turn of the millennium. And that particular book, Creating Mandalas, was translated into 11 languages and went worldwide. And we feel as art therapists that Jung, by putting his finger on the mandala as representative of the self, when we're in crisis, that just drawing mandalas, the mandala coloring book movement has gone in grocery stores across the country, somewhat growing out of Suzanne Fincher's.
Yeah,
She
Matthew's got a
started a
bunch of them.
series of
There
them.
it is.
So if you have any comments about the significance of the mandala, I was so grateful that you showed those two slides together in your study of Jung's life.
Let me just quickly say 4 things, if I can remember them quickly. Did I say quickly? I'll do it quickly. And then we can move on to another thing. But, one, my website, the homepage is a mandala. Very important to me. And it's a way of the theme of many of Jung's discussions of collecting differences or pieces together and creating a unity of some sort. It plays the role in the union of opposites, conjunction of opposites. But part of Jung's elaboration, I think he actually called it a discovery. The discovery of the mandala was largely within the Black Book stuff, and that's where he really got hold of it. And there's an experience he had late 20s of a dream, seeing Liverpool in England, but seeing a brilliant lights or brilliant shining magnolia tree, I believe. And it was after a bunch of things. And he thought this pictured the center. And so, and he reached the center and he sort of was in awe of this thing. And so to him, not only the mandala was important, but the center of the mandala. What was I going to say? 4 things, but I at least would say that, the UFO mandala connection is a big deal. Hopefully Sam will elaborate on some of that, at least in his UFO Jung talk in January, February. But oh, and the fourth thing I think is that some people, including a woman we know, don't resonate with the mandala as a symbol of the self or symbol of something essence. She prefers other symbols, and so it does. So the mandala is not going to resonate with everybody, no matter what form it takes. Oh, and that the tree is another kind of three-dimensionality or three-dimensional representation of the mandala, so that the subsectioning of the tree, the rings, are kind of the mandala, and both the tree and the mandala have a relationship. But let's see if anyone else has any other comments, because we're about to have the formal ending and then can go further.
You can thank Matthew for putting up a mandala.
Yeah. So I had a comment. I think that ancient pictographs and things, rock art, cave art, stuff like that. I think if written language would have been around, I think it would have been, supplementing both ways, like you're saying, the dream visions and things like that, and the
Matthew, can I say your wife did that? Is that kosher?
she absolutely, yes, that's totally fine.
She does wonderful prints of very many sorts, including a lot of these circular themes with nature images, where she uses the dry leaves and all kinds of things in the print process.
Yeah, and this one's called Planet.
Called
Series,
Planet.
Planet Series 4.
As you moved into it, I saw the woman quite strongly in the green. And now that you're focusing that way on it, I can hardly see her, only the leaves.
For some reason, your image is narrower than most of ours. But you might be on. But
yeah, it's a wood grain. But yeah, she's exceptional. If anybody wants to look at her stuff, she's exceptional. I wish she were here right now, because she would totally dig it. I'm going to get her to watch the recording.
You can put her website on the chat room if you want, or people can contact me.
Okay, cool.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say before we have the first stop, at least?
And I think it's kind of a timeless thing, and it's almost a matter of tapping in, or opening yourself to be tapped, or just I think you're totally right, though.
One thing I didn't go over as much as I wish I would have is that Jung had a remarkable ability to tap in and be tapped, as you put it. And many people, including me, have been so frustrated in many times because it's so darn hard to do those, especially in the face of society where you risk so many things. And again, especially if you talk about it or are public or so and so on. And so between the the difficulty to tap into revelation or have a dream that inspires you, especially in the face of a society where Jung said once that those who deal with some of this, if they're either foolish enough or courageous enough, will end up in a psychiatric hospital, either foolish or courageous. And that's a lot of the predicament. But anyway, that's kind of the ambiguity of it. But to go back, to the more hopeful side.
Can we thus conclude that we need to create our own red books? I know Jung encouraged his own patients to do that. And maybe the modern journaling process, which I definitely encourage patients to use for their visions and their thoughts and feelings as a process.
Yeah, I wish, if some of us stay around after the formal end time, I hope we could stick on that, because there's a lot to say on that. I've read articles. I, of course, have a lot of my own personal experience and feelings, but I've read articles both in a kind of positive and negative sense of that, where on the negative, it's like, oh, should we all create our own Bible, our own book? And the answer is, you certainly should if you can and want to, or must. But he was kind of saying it's like I think was the word solipsis, or is it all a kind of curling in on our own tails? Anyway, he had some difficulty with that. But the positive is that, yes, and that of course is what Jung was largely doing with his clients and the people that were working with him. And that is a compensation for the lack of direct experience and the lack of individual work with all that.
And societies, traditional societies have, the people to kind of give direction and, communicate with, and interpret, things, on this level. Practitioners, I'm a professional.
Bert, should we create a certain break so that some people can leave, and then we can keep following up for those of us who want to continue?
Well, I'm a big believer in freedom. Anybody that would like to leave, you're not getting hell points if you walk out. I mean, you get to go if you need to go. If you want to go get supper or mix a drink, fine. If you want to hang around, we would love to hang with you. So,
yes, thank you for
have a great evening.
Thank you for joining. Some of you will stick around, I hope. But
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Sam.
Bye, Sam.
Bye, Sam.
Bye, Sam.
Carolina.
You're heading away, Roberta. Bye-bye. Good to meet you.
No, I was saying goodbye to Sam.
Okay, good.
May I stay?
Steve, everyone, thank you. Take care.
Steve, hey, Steve. Can you hear me? Steve, let me just say, Steve asked a copy of the slides. I would say, let me give you my email. Everything I have is on my website. It'll eventually be there, but I'd be glad to send that to you, or send the slides to you, or whatever you want. Let me put my email in the chat room. Okay.
Yeah, there was just a lot that you had to move through pretty quickly that I was interested in getting another look at. So thanks, Evan.
Yes.
And thanks for all the work. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to stay a little bit longer, but it's 1:37 already here in the Netherlands.
1:37.
Yeah.
Dominique, welcome.
Yes.
I didn't get to say, I did, but beautiful
Thank
name.
you very much. Thank you very much.
Mélanger, is that how you pronounce your last name? Mélanger? Okay.
Yes, Mélanger. Yes, that's my name.
Dominique,
Yeah.
Is it Dominique? Dominique, Dominique.
Yes.
I've spoken with you on Facebook. I'm very glad you came.
Yeah, I'm very happy.
But you're going to stay at least a couple more minutes. But
yes, I'll stay a bit longer. Yes. Thank you so much.
Sure.
It was really enlightening, and it's a pity you had to go through some slides so fast, because some of them were really fascinating. Yes. So.
Well, and I partly must apologize because unlike my past presentations, I was literally working on this until I appeared out from behind the curtain.
Okay.
And so part of it was my problem. Had I been a little more careful, you wouldn't have known there were other slides, because I would know that I would. So, but Yeah, I wish I could have said them too, and we, I could send you those too, but
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I would love to have a copy of the slides so I could study them. Just a comment. I'm on a Facebook called Jung and the Creative Bridge, and several of the points that you said tonight that you focused on in terms of what Jung's contributions are, they seem very timely because the people posting on the Facebook, and they're posting some of them very long quotes from Jung from the different works. What you presented tonight was very much in keeping with what they've been writing about this week. They've been mostly quoting Jung, but no one has quoted or tackled the Black books. No one in that group has even mentioned them that I ever remember. They're talking about more basic works that I think that are more widely known.
Unfortunately, I didn't hear every single thing you said because I kind of got things coming from different directions, but it was basically that in the discussions and people who are talking about, a great shift or transition, and then that the Black books are almost not at all mentioned in that discussion. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why I tuned in, because I've never heard anyone offer to even speak about them. And yet what I understood from you is there were some very important conversations that Jung had with his own soul. And isn't it interesting? They're just coming up now. I know the Black book was held back by his family, by his grandson, for many, many years, and it finally came out. So the fact that these are finally coming out, I think is interesting.
The Black books, as far as I can tell, are intimately connected with access to the Red books, so that I think both were prevented by the family from reaching most of the public. And then, but once the Red book negotiation was made for the Red book to become published, I believe at that same time period, the Black book was more or less, I would have to clarify on that, but more or less in the same basket, so to speak. So the Red book thing had to be edited and all that, took a decade or more. They knew that the Black books would become published, but then that took a decade or more. I would say, because it's an area I rarely can say, so I won't say much, but and that is, not only do I think that the Black books and Red books play a role in, and it depends on how you phrase it, but part of the general vibe of a pivot point, a transition. You mentioned Jung actually did directly associate it with the advent of the age of Aquarius, a shift into a post-Christian or a post-Pisces kind of thing. This whole thing, it not only is in part of Jung's intent or process, it's involved in my transitional pivot from, and so to me it's fundamental. It's just that it's not on the morning news, and it's not taught in psychology 101, but so I'd be glad to discuss more of that with you in the future, or somehow participate, but so
my actual
No, go ahead.
my actual feeling is, if I didn't have the map of the psyche, and as I envisioned it, and that's why I was very interested to see what Jung envisioned himself. I hadn't seen that before. I don't think I could have done my own personal work if I had not had him as a role model. And I actually see Jung as the visionary for the shift in consciousness that's happening now. I don't know anyone who actually talked about the goal of life being to expand our consciousness and the stages that the individuation process that we need to go through to complete that process. And I have found my students also have found his work. I've required man and his symbols of every class I've taught since I learned of the book in 1973. So it tells you a little bit how old I am. And I've talked in the past month, I've talked to 2 people who said that reading Man and the Symbols changed their life. That they felt they were kind of weird and different. And this is the same way I felt. Once I read Man and His Symbols, I thought, oh, somebody else thinks the way I do. I'm not that strange or unusual.
Yeah.
Because I could only find certain people that I could talk to about ways that I perceived life to be.
Well, now all that is so important, isn't it? It certainly applies to my case in terms of inspiration and a connection. And I'm 39, but there's a lot of talk about Jung's and colleagues and that influence on the whether New Age, counterculture movements in psychology and so on. But the Memories, Dreams, Reflections, which came out before Man and His Symbols, but were worked on around the same time period, was a bestseller in 1963. That's a bestseller. Now I don't really know what that means in this context, but Man and His Symbols. So, but yeah, I mean, right? That's finding the Red Book played a certain key role for me in that same way, and I wouldn't be able to live now. The Red Book does not do everything I need. I need, of course, but I wouldn't be able to do life without it. But
I was seeing Dominique's tuning in and having a positive response to that statement. I would love to hear what she might have to say. Dominique, would you like to? Please.
Yes, reading the Man and His Symbols, for example, and reading the Red Book, it's a life-changing experience. I totally agree. Yeah, exactly. Life-changing. And you feel that at last someone has thought things you were thinking and not collecting correctly, perhaps, at first. And suddenly it becomes so obvious. It's a wonderful experience, really.
One thing I like about Man and His Symbols is that there's 4 authors. Louis von Franz,
yes,
and then 2 others I can't remember, and then Jung did the dream work that I think I mentioned in the talk, and that's another level to this, because it's not simply either one person or
Aniela Jaffe, Marie-Louise von Franz.
Yes.
And
Joseph Henderson.
Yes.
Who was in California, the way West Coast, where a lot of people think of the consciousness movement happening in California, that California gets a lot of credit for it. But there were a lot of Jungians there also.
That book was intended by, I believe, the publisher or whoever brought the idea, and Jung really had to chew on it for a long time at first, not wanting to do it, at least from what I recall, because the intention was to create something of his works or about the subjects, but for a broader audience. I don't know if people remember that. I think I'm correct on that.
In the introduction, it talks, I think, about William Freeman asking him if he would write the book, and Jung said, oh, nobody would understand what I have to say. And then he had a dream that said the time was coming when people would need to know what he had to say. So I required the first 100 pages of every one of my students. They didn't all read the last 3 chapters, but And the last one by Angela Jaffe, I think, is more predictive. I think somehow she had more of a predictive sense.
Did she do the one on art or image and art? Is that, or individual?
Hers, I think, is the last one, and it was somewhat how Jung might apply in the future. Do you want to know an interesting thing? I used to get all the Man and His Symbols copies that I could find. I could get them all the time for $10 on the internet. Do you know they've gone up on Amazon.com? They're now up to $50, $60, $70. That book that used to be as many as you could want to find for $10. The last one I purchased, because I buy them for people and give them as gifts. And for people that I feel are in a certain place, like we might have been, that we needed to read something like that. And the last one I paid $50 for. So they're becoming rare and important to people.
Does that mean it's out of print?
I think it is.
I think so.
I wish it weren't. I wish it would come back.
I had the same experience. I was used to buying copies, and now they've become unaffordable just to buy and give to people. Yes, I think so too.
Well, and I'll just maybe mention that, you know, these red book and black books are so expensive, and I noticed the red books shot up in price when the black book was published, and now has gone back down closer to where it was, maybe even lower. The black books as well have gone down in price. That also limits the ability of people probably who, you know, would prefer access to it in terms of, you know, I want to buy before I pass away, that a woman who Jung did seminars about, Christiana Morgan, and who also did her kind of version of the Red Book. But both the seminars and her work is like, you know, $250+ bucks. And but that's apparently hers is a feminine or female or woman's kind of equivalent of the cosmogonic, cosmological, or visionary, etc. quest. So it would.
I'm wondering how you came to Jung and consequently to the Red Book particularly.
Well, I go over that briefly in my essay that was sent with the email, and 2 essays on my website, but
okay, I guess I missed that. Sorry.
Well, sure, and there's more than anyone would ever care to know, but meaning not in those words, but you know, people have asked me this, and I knew of Jung through the years because I was an anthropology guy and a psychedelic guy and a philosophy guy and so on and so forth. And I think I did dip into many of his works, but I never kind of followed through it as much as I might think, partly because some of it was hard to pin down or hard to connect with my immediate life and so on. And then a friend posted a link about the Red Book in early 2010 spring, and I moved to California and I was able to buy, and I you probably don't want to know too much, but I fell out of my chair when I saw a painting on that video. Now, because it reminded me of one of my dreams, I was pretty kind of, hyped up, but I was so impacted that it was like my dream entered into waking life by seeing his painting. So anyway, I bought it, knowing a little bit about it, and then I just sort of got swept up in the Hawaiian tidal wave of it. Read it many times. So after I dealt with that, I read virtually everything of Jung's. If there's something I haven't read, please send it to me. But and because by seeing the Red Book and gaining access is like peering behind the curtain of this particular historical figure. And in doing so, I describe it on my website as a skeleton key, or a what's the other word, Rosetta Stone. But anyway, it's a in doing so, once you then read the collected works, it's like, my God, you're seeing kind of behind, and you're seeing many sides that you wouldn't otherwise see, perhaps, and can make many connections. So I had, luckily, the time or freedom in some ways to do a lot of that, and so I've written songs with themes from the Red Book. I've done all kinds of things. So when the Black Books were published last year, it was like, and I still need to read the Black Books more than I have. But the Red Book, as much as I talked it up just now, the Black Books are like another gateway into the chambers of Jung, and it's like, oh, there's a gateway in the gateway. There's a hidden doorway within the hidden doorway, and that kind of thing. So, that's kind of some of how I got into it. How about you, Susanna? How did you get into Jung?
Well, I'm a Jungian analyst. I did study and get my diploma in Zurich, but I got into it because I was studying at Fuller Seminary in Pasadena, and I became a marriage and family therapist. And a friend said to me, I think you should go to Zurich. I think that this may be a journey for you. And that's how I got into it. This was, I'm aging myself also, but in the 70s when he introduced me to Jung. But I also am interested in the post-Jungians. Murray Stein is one who's done a lot of writing about, and Andrew Samuels from England. So there are a lot of post-Jungians who are elaborating on some of his work, or a lot of his work. And that's also very helpful.
Okay.
And are critical of him as well, because he was not, perfect. He had his faults too.
And where are you located?
I live in Niceville, Florida, which is in the Panhandle near Pensacola.
Okay. Well,
are you in Alabama?
Yes, Birmingham. That's
Birmingham. Okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with Birmingham.
The Jung After Work, which Bert hosts, was started here, and most of the presenters tend to be, or maybe always, Birmingham folks.
Yeah, I belong to the New England group of Jungian analysts, and the main group has a lot of speakers also. I did a presentation on rituals for them, but I also listened to Nancy Qualls when she gave her talk. So yeah.
This past spring, or
yes.
Now, are you talking about the workshops or the discussion group talk?
The discussion group when she did on the feminine.
Okay.
Yeah.
She's this year she sometimes presents for the discussion group here, and then the Friends of Jung South is a nonprofit that does workshops for continuing education credits and just for general. And she did one earlier this year, which was probably it was on Eros and the feminine, but yeah, hopefully she'll do another one, and hopefully you'll be back for another one too.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Do you still do presentations yourself, Susanna?
At times. My major work really is with the military. I do a lot of work with the active duty military. I live near Eglin Air Force Base, so I work there, and then Military One Source. So that's been my focus. Because when I went to Zurich, I was living in Germany and working with the military. So I feel that that's been my journey. And it's amazing how interested people in the military become when you ask them to write down their dreams and to start to think about them. And I use the iceberg analogy about, the conscious is above the iceberg and the part beneath is the unconscious. And the way we can get to know it is through dreams. And a lot of them really take that up. So that's kind of where I am. Yeah.
In my
Many
last,
of your- Go ahead, I'm sorry.
well, in my last presentation in March on the transcendent function, I do quote Jung from, I think, a 1930s children's seminar where he talks about a type of dream that he, in my opinion, didn't talk as much about. And let's see, what was it? There are different words for it. And you talking about the military reminded me, so I just wanted to briefly say it. Reactive reproduction shock or shell shock dreams. And just because, even though I have never dealt much directly with veterans and military service members, the whole realm of, PTSD we use a lot, but trauma and PTSD and so on and so forth, I'm very, very concerned and considerate about. And so, and have had, but and to my mind, if you can do a psychological therapy or transition with those dreams, the more the merrier. But in my opinion, often there has to be other techniques as well, including nutritional and sometimes chemical. But I hope I hear more about your work there.
Yeah, I agree. Don Kalshed, who is a Jungian analyst in New England now, he's really the one who does a lot of work with trauma. And he's written 2 books on it. So it's very helpful to see where they're at. I mean, there is a lot of trauma in the military people's lives, not just from the military, but even in their childhood. So many of them have really traumatic experiences. And I can't always get to that, but I recommend them to someone after we finish our sessions to see someone face to face.
Mhm.
So
Have
most
to
of you,
go.
oh, well, have a great
Bye-bye.
evening. Good to meet you, Roberta.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. I
Bye-bye.
really enjoyed being here. Thanks so much. What a very mutually supportive and compassionate group. It was a pleasure to be here.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
I was very glad to have you.
And I'm looking forward to seeing the slides. I missed so much of it. I was in session with a client and she went long, and here I am. But
Oh.
anyway, Evan, I was really looking forward to it. So and I'm going to find your website. I didn't know you had a website. So I will
Well-
start following you on that then.
Well, I don't think you can technically follow me, but
I can visit it.
yeah, but please email me, okay? And if you don't, I'm gonna get Bert to give me your email, but I'll
Yeah,
send,
you can.
but please just email me and I will send you the slides and the speech.
Okay. Okay. Because I was so excited about this and thought I had blocked out my last appointment, but nope, she slipped in. So
Yeah, well,
it happens.
I knew you were coming, and I guess I didn't quite know when you arrived, but yeah, I was looking forward to seeing you. You should know that my original speech and slides were cut quite a bit because of time. I had to kind of cater it, but I'll get it to you.
Oh, great. I look forward to it very much. I do online therapy with BetterHelp. And
Mhm.
so I have to have my schedule online, and people just schedule themselves, and sometimes it can be a surprise.
Yes.
Better Health.
BetterHelp.
It's probably had a let's say a lot of growth since pandemic, but either way, I at least ideally am glad that it can perhaps help transcend some of the normal barriers, both space-wise and personality-wise, maybe give you a little more option of who you see, but
I really enjoyed doing it. I have clients from all over Alabama, and it's been very different for me. I don't see people in person anymore, and I was retired, and I didn't like it. And I miss doing therapy, so now
Yeah.
I can do it.
I thought I remember you saying you, if not retired, you
Sort of. I
something.
tried. It didn't stick. But yeah, now I see folks, and I'm just really loving it. And she was talking about the trauma of people in the military. And since I'm on BetterHelp, I have a lot of military people in the military who are stationed in Alabama, and they're my clients. And she's right. There is a lot of old ugly stuff that people have had to deal with.
I think calls to suicide warm lines or hotlines from veterans and military increased since the Afghani war
Yep.
stops. But of course, it was always a major problem, but so is there any other thing that we could talk about?
I'm going to have to go, but I will see you next time and look forward to it.
All right, I'll be looking for your email.
I've got it written down right here.
All right.
I'll get it. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Evan, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you for putting this on.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Paige. Good to see you, and Matthew, and all of you. There was Susanna, Dominique, and it's been great. I hope you all have a wonderful month until we get together again. And next month, this is November, so December, we're going to be talking about symbols and Father Christmas, Saint Nicholas, and Santa Claus, reindeer. I don't know how far it's going to go, but we'll see. And y'all have a great. Anybody? Am I cutting off anyone? I was going to say good night. Let's go get some supper.
Right. Good night. Thank you.
Talk to y'all later.
Thanks, Bert. Thanks, Evan.
Thank you. Check you later.
Bye-bye.